Say welcome everyone to XR Safety Week. This is day 4, the medical XR track. We have a fantastic panel lined up for you. So I'm going to introduce Oliver. Oliver, please introduce yourself and our fellow panelists. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you very much for being here, and welcome back to the XR Safety Week. This panel is you can see it behind, but I'm going to read it out just for the sake of completion. Physiotherapy, psychotherapy, and beyond. So we're going to be discussing various opportunities and risks in XR with regard to the world of therapy and rehabilitation. So joining us, let's say from that would be your left to your right, your being the audience, we've got Veena Somareddy, who is the CEO of NeuroRehab VR, a VR healthcare startup aimed at building virtual reality therapy exercises for physical therapy. Hi, Veena. We've got, let me see. So, okay, so Valentina, you've got a beard now, so that means that that's not you. So Derek Nielsen, who is the director of product at Applied VR, a company that is working to solve pain through immersive therapeutics. And Valentino Megale is the CEO of the digital health startup Softcare Studios. He's a tech entrepreneur focused on digital health and mental well-being with a PhD in neuropharmacology. I'm Oliver Dada. I'm a physiotherapist, mainly focused on neurological and degenerative pathology, and a VR developer. I'm an advisor for the Medical XR Council. So I'm going to jump in and try to make up for lost time and start off immediately with the first question. So although the general field here is one, which would be, therapy and rehabilitation as a whole, you clearly all have different areas of focus on this topic. So it would be great if you each want to briefly describe what you're working on right now, just a little bit more in depth. We can start from Veena here and then go work that way.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction and organizing this panel. I'm excited about it. So I'm Veena, the CEO of NeuroRehab VR, and we develop virtual reality therapy exercises for physical therapy and occupational therapy. So we started with a lot of patients who've had, stroke, brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, and trying to get back their limb function by doing physical therapy, and we are gamifying it so that it's more fun, engaging, and motivating for the patients, and they can also see their progress reports or while they're going through that therapy using virtual reality.
Excellent. So that gives us a pretty good idea. What about Derek? Do you want to?
Yeah, thanks again for that intro, Oliver, and really excited to be here today. So again, Derek, Director of Product at Applied VR, and Applied VR's mission is really working to solve pain with immersive therapeutics. And our flagship product, EaseVRX, is an immersive therapeutic that is targeted at helping patients manage chronic lower back pain. So we've built out a VR headset with an 8-week program where patients go through one experience a day, and have assembled a body of clinical evidence to demonstrate that it really helps with a variety of different measures of pain intensity, and interference with various aspects of daily life. And we're very proud that actually just in this last month, in November, we received a de novo clearance from the FDA, recognizing EaseVRX as a new category of medical device, and acknowledging sort of the efficacy and the safety of that digital therapeutic. So that's what we're working on at a high level.
Excellent. Valentino?
Yes, thanks again for inviting me today. Great to be here with you all. I'm Valentino Megale, CEO at the Italian startup Softcare Studios. So basically, we are using immersive technologies for improving pain and anxiety management in hospitalized patients. And our core project is Tommy. So our core focus are pediatrics, where we are using immersive technologies to help young patients go beyond the walls of the hospitals. We started working with pediatric oncology at the beginning, and we are now moving towards surgery and vascular access with the goal to reduce sedation of children. So thank you again.
That's awesome. So you have, quite a variety of different things all together there, which is kind of cool because you can, cover a wide area. even under the same, panel title. I'm going to ask this. Anyone, can comment on this. If you don't have anything to say, feel free to bypass it. The problem that is tackled by your solution, how would you expect it to be treated conventionally, just very briefly? And would you expect this solution to replace the conventional therapy, or would it be complementary to the traditional therapy?
Sure, I can start
Yeah,
off.
sure.
Yeah, so we always think as we are providing a tool and making the life for the physical therapist more efficient, and also collect data analytics as they go, because physical therapy usually is very subjective. So we think of ourselves as providing this tool for physical therapists. We are not trying to replace them. And for us, it's best used in conjunction with the physical therapist while they're working on the patient, just to enhance their experience, their motivation, engagement, and lead to better outcomes by providing this tool. So that's how we look at it.
Cool. What about
Happy
you,
to
Derek?
take. Yeah, so with chronic lower back pain, there's it's a fairly common condition, unfortunately. And there's a variety of sort of well-established modalities for addressing it. Probably the most sort of controversial and relevant one today is obviously pharmaceutical solutions using opiates to manage pain. People will also use over-the-counter medications. There's surgeries, transcutaneous, like electrical stimulation is one method that's often used, along with in-person therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy and similar sort of techniques to address that sort of biopsychosocial element of chronic pain. And in terms of your question of, is this a replacement or an adjunct? I can point to really just the indications for use on our label that we submitted to the FDA, where EasyRx is intended as an adjunctive treatment in addition to those various other modalities for pain management. But the intent and the hope there is, while we're not, replacing these other modalities entirely, we can hopefully, reduce sort of the cost of care, and, reduce dependence on, other modalities that do have potentially severe side effects, such as, opiate prescription drugs or surgeries that often carry risks that are far greater than putting on a VR headset.
That's okay.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely agree with Vina and Derek. The future of virtual reality is basically into the integration with the ongoing and traditional treatments. From our point of view, virtual reality also opens the doors to the experience or experiential medicine and therapy. So basically, we are understanding that therapy is not only administering drugs or administering essential medical treatments. It's a whole experience that is able to impact not only patients, but also the caregivers and the efficiency of healthcare operators. So in this case, virtual reality is only one tool, one piece of a wider puzzle, where obviously the setting and how you use virtual reality in that settings matters. So it's a complex process. It's not about replacing, but integrating wisely into what we know today based on the data that we can collect with research, just like Applied VR is doing as well.
Awesome. Those are, I think, very sort of good answers. And for somebody who isn't in our space, because I mean, a lot of us here are kind of familiar with the XR space, but I think with people who aren't, those would also be reassuring answers to some extent, right? When it comes to complex issues involving psychology, neurology, pain perception, biomechanics, so this is all of you, each one of you has a different area here, but there continues to be some debate about how often research, although being statistically significant, manages not always to be relevant in the clinical setting. In a field where you have layers upon layers of variables that vary for each individual case, even when you restrict your patient population significantly. So how difficult is it to navigate this somewhat troubled context to gather research about XR technologies when you're trying to gather data to demonstrate something and make it significant to clinicians as you're really on a terrain which isn't super straightforward? How have you found difficulties with that?
Sure, I can add to that. I mean, that is a very good question, and we've always heard this one thing that says, each brain injury, is different from each other. So the patients that come to us, each diagnosis is so different from one another that you have to customize the VR application such that it works for their functional level and where they're at their therapy process. So this is a problem we kind of started to see very early on in the inception of our product. We started at a clinic that we were able to work with patients who have strokes, brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, even Parkinson's and MS, and each of them had such various functional levels that when I created the
Yeah.
first product, it only worked for me. When I built the first app, it did not work for the patient. So right now, we've taken that as one of the pillars of our product and made sure that each app is customizable in real time or by the therapist such that it is exactly at the functional level that the patient is, and they're able to work on whichever part of the body that they want to work on. Which for stroke patient, it could be a lot of shoulder therapy, upper extremity training, working on your core, and also working on weight shifting from side to side for a lot of stroke patients who
Hmm.
tend to put all of their weight on one side, on the
Yeah.
non-affected side. So we took all of this into consideration while building our apps, and it is one of the foundations that we have made sure that we keep in mind that any patient that comes into a clinic is able to use our product. Otherwise, you are only building a product for a very subset and specific subset of patients, and is very hard to grow and scale if you think about it that way. So it's a very good question. And when it comes to making sure it works, we look at a lot of literature review and before we design an app. So we look at the literature review for that area, maybe VR for upper extremity training or virtual reality for core and balance. Look at what's out there and we try to make it take that information, take that research, and try to make it better and build an app according to the foundations of what's already out there when it comes to neuroplasticity, neuroscience, and biomechanics.
Awesome. Derek.
Yeah, I mean, this is an excellent question, and I think something that we all grapple with one way or another, being kind of at this bleeding edge space of immersive therapeutics. And for us, really, the North Star was being able to go to the FDA and meet their standard for demonstrating the safety and efficacy of the therapeutic that we were trying to get recognized as a medical device. So, a big part of our answer to this was engaging in a dialogue with the pertinent sort of regulatory bodies early on in the process to understand what is kind of the threshold of evidence that they would need to see in order to be able to make that determination that yes, this is a viable therapy. But of course, it's not just a matter of having the statistical significance in our clinical trials, our randomized controlled trials. It's a matter of that clinical sort of threshold as well. Just because you can demonstrate that something is statistically significant does not necessarily imply that it's clinically significant. So for that, we also had to engage a lot with subject matter experts and experts in the field, such as Beth Darnall, who's our chief medical officer and is a at Stanford University, to understand, what would we need to demonstrate in order for clinicians to see this, healthcare practitioners, and say this is something that is a viable alternative to existing therapies. One other, there's a lot to unpack here, and I could probably go on far too long about this. One thing that I'll highlight that we're particularly proud of at Applied VR is the way that we actually control for the effects of virtual reality in our clinical trials. Because, putting on a VR headset and simply the isolation and the novelty of using VR for someone who's maybe more VR naive could be reasonably expected to have an impact on one's perception of pain. There's sort of a distraction and isolation effect there. So we actually had to build from the ground up something that we call our VR sham, and you can really think of it as like a VR placebo pill. And it's the same VR headset, the same sort of user interface, the same number of experiences, the same total duration of experience. We tried to match as much as we could, but then simply stripped out all of the therapeutic content that we believe is sort of our mechanism of action that actually drives the benefits that our end users see from engaging with our digital therapeutic. And that ended up being compelling for the FDA by demonstrating the difference in impact from our therapeutic to this VR placebo that we developed. That was a key piece of us proving out to the FDA and to clinicians that this was something that was truly effective in that randomized control trial. The last thing I'll add on really quickly is, RCTs are one thing and they're important for regulatory approval, but you really need that sort of health economics and outcomes research aspect and that RWE, or real world evidence of, okay, this worked fine in your trial, but how does, when the rubber meets the road and this is in the hands of real patients with no or less inclusion and exclusion criteria, what are the effects that you see? And that's something that we've got a lot of confidence about, but is kind of what we're sinking our teeth into next, really, of continuing to build out that body of evidence to get buy-in from the healthcare practitioners and the patients that are such an important part of making this a reality.
Yeah, no easy feat. Valentino.
Yes, awesome. That's great idea of a VR placebo. I think this was one of the most important challenges when trying to isolate basically the effect of virtual reality, because when you administer a drug, obviously the mechanism of action is pretty clear, obviously always to be better understood. But when you are using virtual reality, it's really challenging to separate virtual reality, as I said before, from the setting of use, from how trained is the healthcare personnel, how educated are patients about the use and the consume of virtual reality. So these are all elements that are not equal, because there is no one standard patient, no one standard hospital, no one standard therapy experience. So I think a lot of insights to better isolate what are the active principles in virtual reality could come from multicentric studies that are very important, because in that case, you are able to build a common ground across very different clinical settings, very different clinical conditions. And in that case, using the same standard content, you can understand what are the elements that are really impactful across communities, across different kind of conditions. So this is something that we are also doing with our project Tommy. We are now starting using that in the vascular access in order to reduce the sedation. We had very promising first data in the first center here in Milan, but now we are extending that to different hospitals. And believe me, hospitals across Italy are very, very different. We are very curious to understand what will be the results when facing this diversity. So that's
Thank you
our
for that.
perspective at the moment.
This is actually really illuminating three really interesting points of view. Going to change completely, because I know that this was a subject that was kind of interesting for some of you. Hardware. What if, like, without going into it too much, but what would you say is the most important couple of things that spring to mind when you're, either building or using third-party hardware for this type of objective?
Vina, you want to take that one?
I
Or,
can, yeah, sure. I can start. Yeah. So first of all, safety. Obviously, you are choosing the right hardware because it provides you with the basic requirements to be safe. We started using at the early beginning the Oculus Go. It was challenging to use also the Go and the Quest right now in the hospitals during the pandemic, because it was too much comfortable. It had the foam, and the foam was a great challenge, obviously, to sanitize the headsets. Now we are using the Quest 2, which enables basically for smooth interfaces. This is a little detail, but fundamental if you want to make virtual reality portable and suitable to be used in different conditions between different kind of patients in the hospitals without waiting too long. Obviously, usability. You want something that is easy to be used, because you are providing headsets sometimes to digital natives that are just test the headset and understand how to use that, and sometimes to elder people who are definitely not familiar with digital technologies, and especially with the paradigm of virtual reality. So in that case, you are really looking for the solution that is immediate, which is intuitive. And so usability and safety, I think, are the priorities.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually gonna. Sorry, go ahead, Derek.
yeah, so to layer on top of that, I would say that at a high level, those are two of the very important ones. To add on to safety, one of the big challenges I feel like I'm continuing to harp on this FDA angle, but there's some internationally recognized standards that you need to meet as a medical device in order to be cleared. It's a series of tests under a standard called IEC 60601. That's everything from electrical safety to water ingress protection to drop and impact tests, and it's a pretty rigorous set of requirements that the hardware needs to meet in order to sort of rise to that standard of being medical device hardware. So finding a headset that we could use that was able to get through that testing, wireless compatibility, there's a lot that goes in there, was very important. You mentioned the ability to sanitize headsets between use. We're an at-home use headset, so that's less of an issue where it's not being frequently passed between headsets, but that's certainly also important. Usability, I think you addressed that beautifully. The other thing that I'll add on that's maybe a little bit perhaps obscure, but something that was very important for us is the ability to have root access to a headset. When you're sourcing a headset off the shelf and you're pursuing it, as again, a medical device, you need to be able to control down to the very lowest level the behavior of that headset, the software that is on the headset, when that headset is updated. And I don't think I necessarily need to name names, but some of the partners that we've been looking at were unwilling to support that. Some of those were, and that was actually a really key determinant for us in terms of which platform we ended up moving forward with, is the level of control that you can have over that system, which in turn drives usability, drives safety, drives some of these other higher level goals that you might be striving for.
Yeah, especially if you want the software to start off immediately, right, with the patient in it, and they don't have to go through a series of menus or something like that. I wanted to sort of extend this question for Vina, because I know that you were telling me about safety precautions when using VR, so maybe that ties in with the hardware issue.
Yeah, definitely. I echo everything what Valentino and Derek spoke about, especially having root access to those headsets and being able to control everything is very important. And being able to have that access for updating, making sure it's safe and it has all the OS updates. So I definitely echo that. I think for us, going back to what we are doing is physical therapy in virtual reality. So we really needed that 6 degrees of freedom tracking in our devices even before we started off. So we started with the HTC Vive, which was a wired system. And then we realized that, some of the safety issues that came with that is, for it being wired, you couldn't really use it with other devices like a treadmill or a overhead harness system. And we want to make sure that our device can be used with any equipment that is available in a physical therapy clinic. So we knew that we wanted to move to a portable system as soon as one came out with 6 degrees of freedom tracking, along with all the safety requirements as in sanitization and usability. And right now we are on the Pico platform, which we felt like.
Okay. What about
Sorry, I was
fall?
just muted.
Oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
guys.
Oh, okay.
Um,
It might be because you're standing still. If you don't move around a bit, sometimes you get muted automatically. I
oh,
think
okay,
it seems to me that that's happening.
got it. Okay, yeah. So those were the standards that we used, and then same thing with the FDA. We had to make sure it's safe, and we have verification and validation with everything that we are building. So that's part of our process, having a quality management system, so that we are tracking each application that we're doing, making sure that the frame rates are high enough, and we have standards inside the company that we use for frame rates, latency, jitter, and all of those things. So,
Mm-hmm.
all that is a big part of what we do. And
Right.
again, like what Derek said, making sure that you are complying with all the FDA regulations.
Mm-hmm. What about yeah, I wanted to ask you, how do you approach like, let's imagine that you're training somebody with Parkinson's, and one of the big risks there would be falling, the risk of falling, right? So do you do like training for the patients so that they can also use that on their own, or is it always assisted by a therapist or somebody?
Yeah, at the moment it is always assisted by the therapist, and the
Okay.
therapist have something called the gait training belt, which they put around the patient, or use an overhead harness system or a standing frame so that they can use it with the virtual reality system.
Okay.
And safety is, very very big, and when it comes to virtual reality, creating that play boundary space around you so the patient knows
Mm-hmm.
that this is their movement space, and making sure that they have no fall risk is very important. And then
Awesome.
it also comes to the contraindications, like having if the patient had a history of seizures or are prone to motion sickness, we do not let them use it.
Right. This is for any, sorry, did you want to finish something?
I'm good.
Okay. So one of the things I was wondering about is when it comes to the environment, are there any considerations on how you design environments for patients? I mean, one obvious one would be you don't want any flashing lights or something like
Yeah,
that, but
definitely.
anything else?
We have definitely put a lot of effort into color theory and making
Mm-hmm.
sure that the environments that we build are instantly calming where as soon as the patient goes in, even though we are working on virtual reality, and making sure there is calming audio so that when they get in, they feel safe, they feel calm, and are ready to start their exercise. So, and we try to use low poly environment just so that, again, to keep that frame rate up, especially for complex applications that we build, and they can get really complex really quick, but just to make sure that we are hitting that frame rate every time.
Okay, and I imagine this is also important for Eric and Valentino with your products as well.
Certainly, yeah. I think Vina did a great job of articulating that. But you know, when you're building a digital therapeutic, you're obviously have some different requirements than you might in, say, like a VR gaming application. So certainly, doing what we can to make the environments that we're putting our patients in immediately sort of calming or soothing is a big piece of it. I think one thing to layer on, in addition to that, is also providing kind of a diversity of environments. Because of the nature of being a medical device, at least with this initial submission, we have a predefined program that the patients go through. So there isn't sort of that capability for a user or a patient to say, oh, you know, these are my preferences for locations or environments. I prefer the ocean to the forest. So we needed to try to put together a
Rick,
to, you know, the broadest possible set of patients, and that was definitely a focus for us there as well. And yeah, it's something that we continue to sort of invest effort in, is understanding, out of looking at the data that we collect from the headset, to understand which of these different types of environments are most associated with engagement and efficacy for the patients, and using that to continue to build out that body of evidence and that more in-depth understanding of sort of the mechanism of action that's driving the therapeutic benefit that our patients are seeing.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yes. From our side, when we are building the content for our patient, just like also Derek said, diversity is a fundamental aspect. As I said, there is no one standard patient. Every patient is unique, and he faces a very great variety of variable conditions. So probably starting with a portfolio focus on the content is successful, because you need to provide enough diversity to fit in the different conditions of patients in the hospitals during their patient's journey. But when building content, we start from defining the profile of fragility of every patient. So we discuss with doctors, with psychologists, even with caregivers, and even with the patients themselves, what they can do or not from the physical point of view, from the psychological point of view, and from the sensory point of view. And we build the content based on these limitations, with the goal to leverage the potential of what patients still can do in their condition, but without pushing too much stress of their constraints, of their boundaries induced by the disease and obviously the hospitalization. So everything starts from an in-deep understanding of the patient and from the context in which the patient is undergoing medical treatments.
What about, we're going to come back from Valentino this time, because this is a subject I know that is dear to you. An important part of XR technology is how it extends aspects of interaction between users, right? So how can XR technology support and promote social cohesion, relationships and interactions, especially in challenging environments such as hospitals or clinics?
Thanks, Oliver. This is a very important question for us, because we started working with pediatric patients, providing VR content to reduce pain, to reduce anxiety during invasive medical procedures. But the nice thing, what we discovered in time, is that basically virtual reality helps patients not only go beyond the walls of the hospitals, but also to disrupt the invisible walls that limit the social interactions between patients, their caregivers, and the health operators in the hospital setting. They're invisible because everyone is just playing their role of being a doctor, being a patient, being a caregiver, and they end not to communicate well as in the outside world. And this is something that is impacting the quality of life of everyone in the hospital. And when children are playing, for instance, Tommy or other content in virtual reality, they reposition their communication, their social interaction in another place, in another context where they can flourish. They can just rediscover to being just children, rediscover to being just players together with their parents that are just co-players. And even doctors enjoy to talk with children about the game and not about therapy and the disease. This creates a common ground which is useful to let emerge communication and social cohesion beyond the invisible walls that are established because of the disease and because of the hospital. And this is something that can be replicated not only in hospitals, but in every community which is critical, like displaced communities, communities living even in very challenging settings, like prisons, like, there are very critical situations, very extreme environments where social cohesion is a problem. So potentially virtual reality can be used also to leverage this kind of repositioning of communication in a better space when a good space is not available in that moment.
Yeah, it's a very compelling thought. Anything you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, one thing I could add on there really quickly. Oh, sorry, Vina, did you want to jump on that?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a fantastic way to look at it, Valentino. One, I guess, slightly different angle that's very relevant to where we all are here today in alt space is I think there's also real potential for these types of extended gatherings to be a sort of further adjunct to immersive therapeutics. One could certainly imagine a functionality inside of a future immersive therapeutic in which not only are you going through an individual program that's been designed and tested to have a certain therapeutic impact, but perhaps you could have some scheduled group therapy sessions in which you're able to go into a similar to this and attend a moderated session with other patients that are going through the exact same program that you are, perhaps in the same week of the program even that you are, and use that as an opportunity to build community of patients who are suffering from the same condition, are going through the same treatment, and realize all the benefits of that sort of community and interpersonal connection, sharing techniques that are effective in their treatment, discussing challenges that they've been facing, getting guidance and input from a moderator. And the technology to do so certainly exists today. I mean, again, look at where we all are here participating in a panel in extended reality. And, I think other web-based VR tools, like I personally am a big fan of Mozilla Hubs as well. I'm sure many of us are familiar with that as well. I think that has a lot of potential for that kind of application. And there are certainly problems that need to be solved there in terms of scalability, cross-state licensing, telehealth ramifications. I mean, it's a complex problem to solve, but I think there's tremendous potential there. In concert with immersive and digital therapeutics as we think of them today.
No, I agree with that. I'm really excited about the future of social VR, both in a healthcare setting and as well as just the metaverse, because I'm a fan of Ready Player One. So I'm excited for the future of that. I can bring in a slightly different perspective from Valentino and Derek on this topic. So for us, our biggest goal for our patients is being able to get back into normal everyday living scenarios like they would, like going grocery shopping, cooking, doing small things every day. So for us, we concentrate a lot on recreating those scenarios so that they can, in virtual reality, in a safe space, train how to go grocery shopping or cooking again, and being able to take that virtual training and transfer that to the real world. And we've seen that happen a lot, and that increases, once you have an incident such as a stroke, they do feel very isolated and depressed because they're, not able to function normally, and then losing those social relationships that they had previously. So one of our patients had uh, older patient had a stroke, and her goal was to be able to go grocery shopping again with her grandkids, and that was what she was working towards. So I'm very excited about being able to provide that kind of training in virtual reality with visual, haptic, and sound and ambience, so they can train and get back to the real world. And when it comes to a lot of patients that we work with who are older patients, they are sometimes maybe intimidated with virtual reality in the beginning, but once they put it on, they love it so much, they go tell their peers to try it out too. And we love that social aspect of what comes out of being excited
Mm-hmm.
about this technology, and seeing these outcomes kind of forms that social group around them as to everybody who's going through physical therapy using VR. So we love that. And one more piece that I would like to touch on is a lot of our patients, depending on which part of the brain that was affected, are also working on speech therapy. And we've seen some residual gains in speech therapy when using virtual reality, where one of our patients was kind of indicating the colors that they saw in our environments while they're going through their speech. So there's just so much opportunity and so much gains that can happen with just having access to this, and the social
Mm-hmm.
changes that is happening in our patients' lives.
Thank you, guys. That was nice. I wanted to go on to a slightly more edgy subject of risk. Now, I'm not going to delve too deep into the whole data thing, because this is going to be covered and has been covered in many different ways, especially by Kavya and company. So I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. There are situations that I've been told about, right, where XR is used in certain parts of the world. People have started using it. This in particular was in physiotherapy, and I'm sure this might, happen in other fields as well. Where software that is, just off-the-shelf software is used in centers as a way to kind of easily handle large numbers of patients without any kind of standards or rules, or it's not software made for that purpose or anything like that. So that's one thing that springs to mind. Another thing would be, if we're, when you start to talk about VR to people who are looking at the money side of things, they're definitely going to be, you'll see their antennas go up, right? And they'll think, I can treat 7 people at the same time in a standardized generic way. Now, as you've all made very clear, each person is very individual. So my fear would be, are we going to risk decreasing the quality of therapy because it costs less? And how do we, contrast that? And how do we also ensure standards, so we're not just using it as a easy thing to prescribe easily and not worry about too much? Any order, whoever wants to start.
Yeah, I can give my perspective on that. One is, there are, some hospitals or clinics that might want to just use off-the-shelf hardware because they're only thinking about virtual reality, but not thinking about what they're actually going to do with virtual reality. And that's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
education, where companies like, us on this panel are here to educate the patients and the therapists that it's just not virtual reality or the technology, it's the content that is what's more relevant, right? So I
Yeah.
think we're still in that phase where people are starting to understand that you just can't buy a headset and do physical therapy, or in case of applied VR, have pain reduction. It's also about the content. So we've had those conversations with them, and we kind of tell them, we've also created a document about what you get when you buy a system from Neuro Rehab VR versus an off-the-shelf headset.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about the content that we have created is very, very customized for our patients. And for physical therapy, one couple of things that I can think about is a lot of our patients can't really press buttons, and we had to kind of make sure our applications don't have any button presses, and they can be
Mm-hmm.
used that way. And then I've seen, coming back to functionality, many patients have many different functional levels, and we had to make sure that it's customized such that somebody who's able to only extend their hand 10 degrees can use our system, where somebody who can extend their hand to the full extent can use our system too. So
Yeah.
again, it's just all about education. And when it comes to money and people trying to maybe bill for the therapy that is done with just using VR. We also make sure to say you definitely need to have at least a tech or a PTA supervising the patient to make sure that they're safe, they're getting the right kind of treatment, and the treatment that you're doing is customized for them. So it's not a one size fits all technology, and it's not one size fits all therapy either. So these are things that we
Mm-hmm.
kind of have to just talk about and make sure that they understand
Yeah.
that, and it's not uh, just to make maybe bill more just by using
Yeah.
virtual reality. Yeah.
So I think that's a really good and thought-provoking question, and something that I think this field is certainly going to have to grapple with more and more as time goes on. And I'm glad that there's sort of organizations such as XRSI that are going to be able to really champion sort of the causes of making sure that this technology is used responsibly. So to address kind of your 2 points, which were, I think the first one I'll touch on is this concern of someone seeing dollar signs and saying, oh, well, now I can treat 7 patients instead of 1 patient with the same amount of effort. I think that you certainly do need to be sensitive to this question of unscrupulous doctors. And I think that, really just setting and following through on standards of care around how XR is used in that medical context will go a long way on that front. It's not a silver bullet, of course, and you're going to have, whether it's XR therapeutics or not, that challenge of unscrupulous, providers who might be
Absolutely.
abusing the technology. But I would almost kind of flip that question on its head a little bit, and I haven't seen the latest statistics, and I might be a little bit off here, but I think it's something to the effect of there's like 1 pain doctor per like 10,000 patients who might need their services or something like that. So
Yeah.
while I think there are negatives and potential risks associated with providing providers with the technology to treat a larger number of patients with less of their personal involvement, I actually look at that as more of an opportunity than a risk. The risks need to be managed. I think that by leveraging these technologies, we're going to be able to get help to so many people who otherwise would simply not have access to those who might otherwise be able to give them, say, the cognitive behavioral therapy, or the physical therapy, or the other sort of aspects that might help them manage their condition more effectively. So there's kind of, it's a double-edged sword in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Good answer.
And then to that question, as well as a last quick thought of this sort of dystopian idea of using VR to easily manage a larger number of patients using off-the-shelf, maybe ill-suited for purpose tools. Again, I think that's indeed a real problem that we need to address, but it's not unique to XR either. You hear stories
No, of course
frequently
not,
of
yeah.
the abuse of psychoactive drugs. You've got either opiate painkillers or antipsychotics or other medications that are overprescribed in nursing homes in an effort to reduce the burden on care staff by sedating patients. And again, I think that you're going to run into that issue of unscrupulous providers, whether they're using XR or other modalities. And while I hope that I do not come across as trivializing the importance of taking those risks on head on, I, for one, at least, if I had to have an unscrupulous provider, either giving someone a VR headset to help make it more manageable or giving them antipsychotic drugs with severe side effects to make them more manageable, I know which one I would choose in that case.
Right.
So those are some of my thoughts on that front.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I think that it's definitely legitimate to talk about the efficiency in the hospital. Every hospital is looking for making things more efficient. So saving money, obviously choosing the best cost-effective solutions. But this is a topic to be discussed also with policymakers and basically with the regulators, because we cannot rely on the sensibility of each doctor, of each hospital, and so on. We need to have a framework that is setting the specific requirements for VR to be used into the hospital. So this is a common ground, which is also under development thanks to the XRSI and other organizations across the world. And in that case, as Vina said, everything starts also from the training and the education of healthcare operators. Because for healthcare operators that don't know virtual reality, all headsets are the same and all the applications are the same beyond the screen in virtual reality. It's not like that, obviously. So you need definitely to provide, first of all, an in-person experience to healthcare operators to understand what virtual reality is. And obviously, provide an information about the range between general commercial virtual reality content to contents dedicated to patients and their needs. So education, which is provided by companies, we companies are doing this job. we every one of us know the struggles and the challenge from this point of view, but we need a framework to build upon that virtual reality applications for specifically for patients.
I like the fact that all three of you have brought it back to the question of education, awareness, and frameworks, and guidelines for doing that, because I think that's basically what it kind of boils down to, especially in this stage where we still need to kind of know where we're going. We're going to ask Josh or the deity Marco up there whether we have time for one more question.
Yeah, I'd say we have time. We started a little late.
Oh, there you are.
so-
Sorry, I was
Yeah,
looking
yeah.
up there.
Please go ahead.
Okay, cool. So I'd like to ask you guys, in a world that is, soon, maybe, possibly, we hope, perhaps, going to be enveloped in an additional layer of reality, right? That can now be perceived by our senses, because in a sense, this digital layer is already present, but now it's become perceivable by everyone, or it will be at any rate. It's important that we manage to account for everyone's mental health in that, immersed in that. So is this an important topic? I'm sure you're all going to say is, but how will we adapt to that? Will it be something that will kind of happen naturally, or is it something that needs addressing?
We can start.
Anyone?
I think that we should start from recognizing the importance of mental well-being here in the metaverse. So basically, in the physical world, it's very important. I think never before, just like during the pandemic, we understood what our mind is, how precious it is, and how important it is to support it. And everything starts from the sensibility, and we will bring the sensibility in any kind of new verse we are going to build, a metaverse, a space verse, and so on and so on. So I think everything starts from recognizing it right now here beyond this headset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think to directly answer, part of your question of is this something that needs addressing or something that will sort of work itself out? Unfortunately, I think we need to look only to, the evolution of social media and the corporate responsibility or really lack thereof that has led to a lot of the, increasingly widely discussed, negative ramifications
Yeah.
and impacts of some of these technologies that have so much promise to connect us, but have kind of a dark side there as well. So I think that it's going to take a collaborative approach between companies that make it part of their mission to demonstrate responsibility around how these technologies are used, policymakers, regulators, in terms of probably setting up some guidelines around how these technologies again should be kind of developed and perhaps I'm reluctant to use the word controlled, but trying to instill sort of some best practices and again a sense of responsibility in the interest of sort of our kind of shared humanity and the individual's mental health as we kind of charge full speed ahead into this brave new world. And I would love to say that I had some crisp answers to how we could resolve that problem. But it's a real challenge. I think that you're getting to kind of one of the biggest problems that is yet to be solved. Because I think, to be honest, we don't really know exactly what the shape of those problems is even going to be until we're probably a little bit farther along this road. Hopefully, we can take some learnings from kind of the current digital landscape that is not yet sort of at this threshold of sort of the immersive perceivability, and carry those lessons forward into this new kind of framework. But some of them are going to apply, some of them are not, and we're going to have to really, I think, come together as a community and as a society to confront these challenges and hopefully do a better job time around of keeping that aspect of mental health, as a priority.
That was a really good answer. You took that. Some of the things I wanted to say, just like we can take the lessons that we have learned from social media and the digital space. Nobody knew that we would have biases in the social media world, and especially with what's happening at Facebook, that we would go through something like this. So we have the chance to make a real change when it comes to the metaverse, and making sure we are building on top of the lessons that we already have. We can obviously not predict the future, but we can set those standards so that there is equal opportunity and uh, equality when it comes to the metaverse. And then coming back to the mental health piece for patients too is another perspective that I want to bring on, is when, because we deal with a lot of patients who have had stroke, brain injuries, could be, or in kind of a depressed state, especially when they go from being able to do everything one day and being in a wheelchair the next day. They deal with a lot of mental health issues, and mobility is a big part of it. Not being able to do you always do with the change that was right. So there's always good things that they come out of new technology and make all it and working towards important as the early adopter and change what you're right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We probably didn't. I don't know if it was just me, but you broke up a little bit at the end. But yeah, yeah, those answers are very thought inspiring, and obviously that's just the question, regarding as if this was all in isolation, then that obviously is going to interact with all the other things in our society. It's not like we live in a VR bubble. You're going to have climate change and all the rest interacting with all that. So who knows, right, where that's going to take us. I would be really happy to go on for a lot longer because you all have a lot of interesting insights in different aspects of this topic. But I'm going to end now because we're more or less at the end of the time. Thank you guys for your thoughts and insight, because there were much respect, lots of stuff that was really interesting. And congratulations on your endeavors, because it does take courage and passion to venture into unexplored waters. And it's for a super important cause that's personally very dear to my heart, because it's about, giving people freedom, whether it's freedom from pain or freedom to have more control over their body or freedom to go places they couldn't get to. So we all hope that, yeah, this all works. Valentino, Vina, Derek, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank all of you for watching, wherever you are in the world. And huge thanks to the sponsors and organizers of the event. They've done a really good job. There's probably not anything else quite like this in the XR space. So kudos to you all. You can check out all the previous panels, just in case you just got here and don't know what this is all about, at xrsafetyweek.org/agenda. And you can watch those on YouTube as well if you are so inclined. And that's all. Thank you, everyone.